Mr. President, members of the legislature, I don't like these subsidy bills, and that's what they are. When ethanol was the rage, and it's the biggest scamming boondoggle in this country, all kinds of promises were made. And it boggles my mind how so many otherwise sane, sensible people can suggest that the ethanol produced in this country is going to reduce to any significant degree Americans' reliance on petroleum-based fuel and America's reliance on fuel that comes from outside this country. America is never going to be fuel self-reliant. The percentage reduction of the total amount of fuel used in this country that will be caused by ethanol is relatively inconsequential. I've heard people complaining, Senator Hansen, about how hot it is in here. And I want to remind my colleagues that it's just a preview and not nearly as hot as it's going to be where most of you are going. You know who you are. I don't. But I have a pretty good idea. I'd like to ask Senator Langemeier a question or two.
Senator Langemeier, will you yield?
Yes.
Senator Langemeier, does it require any type of fuel to produce this product that your bill talks about?
Yes.
Is there machinery involved?
Yes.
Are there trucks or other vehicles involved?
Yes.
Are there tractors?
I don't know about that one.
How will this fuel be transported from the place where it is produced to wherever it is going to be sold?
Train or truck?
No pipeline?
Not the B100 product.
Okay. What fuel is going to be used to produce this biodiesel fuel?
Depending on what type of facility you buy, just about every fuel source that's out there.
Will there be any petroleum-based fuel?
You bet.
Will there be any ethanol?
I don't know for sure.
So with all this talk of ethanol, ethanol cannot be used to produce ethanol. Ethanol is not going to be used to produce this biodiesel fuel. Can this biodiesel fuel be used once it comes into being to produce biodiesel fuel?
Yes.
Will biodiesel fuel be adequate to provide all of the fuel needed to produce the biodiesel fuel that will be produced in Nebraska under your bill?
I don't know for sure.
Do you think it will be? Speculate.
Yes, it can be. Can it be 100% of the source? That I do not know.
What kind of vehicles use this biodiesel fuel that is described in your bill?
Typically trucks.
What kind of trucks? What's the smallest truck that will use it?
All the way down to diesel pickups.
And how large are they? Roughly.
6,000-pound vehicles.
And the largest that will use it?
Over-the-road semis, combines, tractors.
Are they using this kind of fuel now?
Yes.
Where is it produced?
Typically it's coming out of Fort Collins, Colorado.
And is it subsidized in Fort Collins, Colorado?
That's where it's distributed. It's made across the country, and it is subsidized in a number of other states.
And without the subsidy, it couldn't be produced, could it? In other words, it can't pay its own freight, just like ethanol cannot pay its own freight. Isn't that true?
That I couldn't tell you.
Well, you can tell me, though, about ethanol, that if it were not heavily subsidized by the federal and the state governments, ethanol as an industry would cease to exist. Isn't that true?
You and I would agree on ethanol.
Okay, so...
1 minute.
1 minute? Who said that? I didn't recognize... Senator Ashford, did you say that? Somebody said 1 minute. Well, I'm going to take it that that's how much time I had when that statement was made, and some seconds have elapsed, so I will stop now. Thank you. Mr. President, you said that. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. Thank you, Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now I've become oriented, and I know who is in the chair, so the voice that told me 1 minute had total authority to say that. But to show how obedient and accommodating I am, even though the voice could have come out of the ceiling, I was complying with its dictate because it sounded authoritative. And had I not complied, there might have been a thunderbolt and nothing would be here except a little puff of green smoke. I want to ask Senator Langemeier a few questions if he will yield.
Senator Langemeier, will you yield?
Yes.
Senator Langemeier, in order for the credits to issue, the plant must be operable, if I've understood you correctly.
Correct. That's in the committee amendment.
Is there any requirement as to how many gallons of this product must be produced prior to the issuance of the credits?
No.
So the plant could be operating and not producing any product, and the credits under the terms of the bill right now would be issued. Is that right?
Correct.
And they can be utilized in that taxable year that would be involved.
Yes.
And the plant needs never have produced a single gallon of this product as the bill is written.
Correct, but you would have to have a profit to use those tax credits against.
Well, here's where I want to ask you another question. Is that credit usable only against the income produced by this plant? Does the bill specify that?
I do not believe so.
Because some people used to drill dry holes, and then they'd get certain oil depletion allowances, and they'd set it off against heavy income in other areas, and they raided the Treasury in the way some people want to raid the general fund and give it to the road department. I want to be sure that's not going to happen here, but it could happen the way the bill is drafted, couldn't it?
I will review that. That would not be the intent if that is available.
If these credits can be carried forward 15 years from the time when they first are earned, is that allowable under the language of the bill right now?
With the committee amendment, yes.
So if I begin my plant operating in the year 2000, and I want to have an even year so it's easy for me to calculate, I could carry that credit forward to the year 2015 before I make use of it. Is that true?
Yes, but depending on the size of your credit, if you carry too much forward, you'll never get it collected.
What's the maximum I could carry forward?
You could carry forward the whole $250,000 if so chose, but it cannot exceed more than 50% of your income.
No matter where that income derived.
Correct.
But the maximum I could carry forward would be $250,000?
Yes.
For a given year, or for the whole 15-year period if I just wanted to stack it up?
It would be collective. So if you just stacked it up to the last year, $250. It could not be $250 per year.
It'd be $250 altogether.
Total aggregate.
So then, if I qualified for the $250 the first year, could I claim more subsequent to that, or is that the total that I can claim during the operation of this plant?
That is the total you can claim.
For the operation of this plant?
Correct.
So then if I claim that in the first year and then I go out of business, then it's over, right?
That would be a potential.
And I would have had to make enough profit from the production of this product to qualify for the $250,000. Is that right?
Correct. But you would have to...
1 minute.
But I wouldn't that wouldn't necessarily be so. All I have to do is have the plant operating and the income from someplace else, and I could set that $250,000 against income from another source under the way the bill is written. Isn't that right? So if it's cheap to just run the plant and I can get this $250,000 and I have other income, then I set it off against that other income, which on its own wouldn't bring me the return that this bill will if I tie it in with this plant. See, I'm cynical. I think there are people out there figuring how to cut corners and dupe a Midwestern legislature with the best of intentions, but who are so upstanding and honest they think nobody is going to cut a corner. I'll have a few more questions, but my time is up. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Chambers, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Senator Chambers. If you were the owner of one of these plants and first year profit was $125,000, you would take that credit, wouldn't you?
If I was going to stay in business, I'm not sure. I really am not sure. If I thought this was a viable operation and I've got what it takes to keep functioning, I might put it off because it's always there. I won't ever lose that. But if I take it, then something could happen. There could be a twist or a turn here, and I lose it. So credits in the bank are worth 2 in your pocket.
Okay. Okay. I won't argue that. But you're acknowledging the importance of that credit. And according to the bill, only half of it could be used in year 1. So if year 2 you made another $125,000, you would acknowledge the balance of that credit in some way, either taking it or banking it.
I'm not disputing any of what you're saying, right. Regardless of how I might address it myself as a plant owner, I'm not disputing the accuracy of what you're saying.
Well, I think you have a concern with somebody trying to take advantage and move in here and drill a dry hole and take credit and then leave. And if it's a profitable, functioning company making money to make use of the credit and they can't use it against other entities, which you've had some discussion about apparently, I think that problem would be taken care of. And
you mean by work on the bill, that we can do something on the bill to deal with the things that I'm questioning?
Right.
I agree. Okay. I think every issue I raised can be dealt with. That's why I kept saying under the language of the bill as written.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Senator Carlson, I'd like to ask you a question or two. Senator Carlson,
excuse me, will you yield?
Yes, I will.
Senator Carlson, you support this bill and what it's attempting to do based on what you've said so far. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you think this can be a profitable venture for a person who invests in it and has sufficient resources to put a plant together that can perform in this fashion? You think that money can be made?
I hope so.
Are you interested in investing in such an operation?
I might be.
Would you object to investing in it with me?
No.
Could I be a silent partner?
No.
Well, sit down. Mr. President, members of the legislature, Senator Langemeyer came to me and we began a discussion immediately, and Senator Rakes happened upon our discussion and added a word or two. In responding further to what Senator Carlson said, these issues can be addressed. I still don't like these subsidy bills, but my opposition is not nearly on this bill what it continues to be as far as ethanol. I have no use at all for ethanol. It is one of the biggest, worst boondoggles to come along, and if Senator Harms, Senator Carlson, I, and Senator Copeland, 3 out of 4 good guys, did something like this other than in ethanol, we'd be facing indictment for fraud, misrepresentation. But because these big multinational corporations have been able to get Congress to keep that huge federal subsidy going, and the legislature has been tricked, double-tricked, triple-tricked into granting these subsidies to ethanol at the state level. It continues, the monster that is, which is ethanol, continues to exist. I say withdraw all of the subsidies, and ethanol as an industry is through. These big companies know that America is not going to be weaned away from its reliance on foreign oil through the production of ethanol. You cannot produce enough ethanol to do that. The first thing you'd have to do, you should ground about 95% of the commercial airplanes. You should take 99.1% of all the SUVs off the highways. You should take any car larger and more modern than a 1999 Honda Civic off the roads. Then you might begin to see a diminution in the amount of oil-based fuel being used in this country. But as long as industries are encouraged to produce more products that make use of the petroleum-based fuels, how in the world are you ever going to catch up to that by producing ethanol? It's not going to work. But you cannot make people in a state like this acknowledge what they have to know if they are awake and observing. You don't even have to be an economist to analyze what's happening in the ethanol arena. Because of the way Senator Langemeyer is approaching this particular boondoggle.
1 minute.
Well, I won't put the whole doggle on it. This boondog, it cannot reach the magnitude of ethanol. But I want to have more information on how many plants might come into existence, because if you put enough of them, the amount of these credits will add up and have a substantial negative impact on the citizens of this state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to yield my time to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, you have 4 minutes and 55.
Thank you. 4 minutes and 55 what, Mr. President? Mr. President?
4 minutes and 44 seconds.
Thank you very much. When I'm dealing with the President, I have to be sure of exactly what we're talking about. When you look at Senator Langemeyer, whom I call Senator Longmire, or long drink of water, and you look at me, when he and I are working together, this is old, the long and the short of it. But in this instance, we are in sync, more or less. I had come up here with the intent to try to bury this bill. But as soon as Senator Langemeyer began to explain it, and he talked about no epic fund, a ceiling on the maximum that a person can rip off from the state if that's what the person chooses to do, under the worst scenario, much of my opposition diminished. This is not the cousin of ethanol. It may not even be the step half cousin of ethanol. But whenever you're going to subsidize a commercial venture, you must look at it with the eyes of somebody who is trying to prevent the bank vault from being robbed, the cash drawer from being tapped, and that's the approach that I want to take. If this can produce income for people in the state, income which is more or less honest when compared to the rapacious actions of the insurance industry, the skullduggery in the ethanol industry, and you come up with something which is relatively clean, it is not difficult for me to support it in the initial stages. And as the bill moves forward, and Senator Langemeyer and Senator Rakes are willing to work, and I'm sure Senator Carlson will add any expertise he can provide, we can get something done that will give Senator Langemeyer what his purpose is, while at the same time taking care of the grave doubts and misgivings that I have about programs such as these. So I do think that he has come forth with something which shows that lessons were learned, messages were received, and the errors that had been made in the past with reference to ethanol will not be made with reference to this product. Everything that I dislike is not necessarily something that I will fight tooth and nail against. I may not like this bill and the approach because it involves subsidies at all. But that doesn't mean that I will try to stop it. I could be mistaken. I'd like to ask Senator Rakes a question or two if he's still back there.
Senator Rakes, will you yield?
Yes.
Senator Rakes, I said I'd like to ask you a question or two. Question number one, can you name for me, if your memory is that good, one of the senators who was trying to do what you said ought to have been done with reference to ethanol, but it was rejected? Can you name one of the senators who did that, who was with that?
Some guy named Chambers, as I recall.
Question number two, can you give me the name of the other senator?
I can. Wickersham.
Were there three?
Yeah, there was a third, but the third was inconsequential.
Thank you, and such modesty. The third was Senator Rakes, and it was a difficult argument to have accepted. In fact, it was impossible to get it accepted. legislatures can become blinded
One
and
minute.
dazzled for various reasons. It could be to go along with a lobbyist who is high pressure. It could be lack of attentiveness and taking the word of somebody who in the past had been trustworthy. But at any rate, the state did make a blunder by acting in haste, and now they are repenting in leisure. And for however many years in the future, I can't say for sure, that Appropriations Committee is going to be reminded of that error. And we have to do all we can to make sure it's not repeated with this program. Thank you, Mr. President. Take an acknowledgement for the record, whether anybody listens or not. And the fewer who listen, probably the better for my ego. Not really. I came up here with the intent to try to kill this bill, as I stated. I've turned around almost completely. I'm supporting the bill. I voted for the amendment and the advancement of the underlying bill, and I will vote to advance the A bill. The reason I will do this with Senator Langemeyer, because he is a man who has shown himself to be true to his word, and a person's word means a lot to me. So on that basis alone, even with misgivings about the bill, I will make no attempt at this stage to delay any aspect of it. I offered no amendments. That is not necessary. In some cases, I have to offer amendments to slow a bill down, to try to get people to look at what I see as flaws. Senator Langemeyer and others have acknowledged that work needs to be done on this bill, and that's as much as I could ask for at this stage of the debate. I would not even want Senator Langemeyer or others who support this bill to try to hastily craft an amendment or a set of amendments to deal with the issues that I think exist here. We want a bill, if it is enacted into law, to be the best that we can produce. We will make sure that the principles, the amounts of money made available to these gougers and others, that's my terminology, the investors, to use you all's terminology, are going to be kept on a short leash. They will have to function in a way envisioned by Senator Langemeyer, who crafted the program, before they can get the underwriting from the state and by the state at the expense of the taxpayers. So this is a bill that has the potential that has been mentioned, with the exception that I'm going to state here. And it's based on something Senator Harms had said. This bill and no other bill enacted by Nebraska or any other state or Congress is going to use vegetables or vegetation, whether it's wood chips, grass, corn, soybeans, or anything else, to take the place of the reliance of America on foreign oil. To show how great that reliance is, the cost has been over 3,000 young people's lives in Iraq. You think the white people in America care anything about an Iraqi? I've heard them described as sand, and then they use the N-word with reference to them. They've destroyed that country. The electricity is not turned on. The water is not drinkable. Nobody is safe on the streets. People are being killed by the scores at random under Saddam Hussein. None of these things were happening. There were people killed, and I don't justify that. But people were not killed at random. People knew where the lines were. And a woman could go out on the street and not be raped or assaulted. People could operate their vegetable markets and other entrepreneurial enterprises on the street and be safe. They had electricity, they had water, and people are now saying, oh, for the days of Saddam Hussein, and this is because of people outside that country talking about we're going to save you, when the only thing they're looking at is that oil.
1 minute.
They're looking at that oil. There are countries in this world where the people are suffering far worse than what the people of Iraq were suffering under Saddam Hussein, but there's no oil under the soil, so you don't hear Bush and these other people saying, we've got to go over there and bring democracy and save these people. but let there be some oil discovered, as they're finding more and more of it in Africa. Why do you think China has taken such a strong interest in the Sudan? Oil. Oil. America is creating the circumstances with this insatiable thirst for oil, and all these little tack-on programs that are being done with ethanol or biodiesel fuel or wind energy are designed to make people feel better, but it is not going to have a substantial impact on America's need for this foreign oil. Thank you, Mr. President.